As healthcare moves away from traditional fee-for-service models, providers need a strategy to stay competitive. That's where Strategic Healthcare Partners comes in. We offer expert consulting and ongoing management oversight for providers looking to form an accountable care organization. From financial feasibility analysis to helping you choose the right ACO in a crowded market, SHP provides the clarity you need to make informed decisions and transition to value-based care. Learn more at shpllc.com.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Stethoscope, Vital Conversations with SHP. We're kicking this season off with a two-part episode related to value-based care trends in the market from a provider's perspective. On today's episode, we'll discuss trends in VBC and outpatient care with our SHP principals, Mike Scribner and John Crew. We covered a variety of topics such as the No Suprises Act and other regulatory and legislative trends, and the role of Medicare Advantage in ambulatory care. We also talked about the impact of traditional Medicare to independent ASCs and the managed care strategies independent ASCs can take and utilize in 2023. Are you ready for this vital conversation? Let's get started.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Crosby with Strategic Healthcare Partners and your host for today's episode, where we are kicking off Season 2. I am joined by SHP principals Mike Scribner and John Crew, where today we will discuss marketplace trends with ambulatory surgery centers or ASCs. So with that, let's just jump right into the conversation. John, you start us off. Take a brief look back at recent trends in the ASC market. What has impacted such things such as value-based care, No Suprises Act, or other regulatory changes as of late for ASCs?
Well, Jason, thanks for asking. And then, again, this is John Crew. We do want to take a moment to take a look back at all the things that have happened, particularly or are happening as it relates to ASCs, particularly in the value-based care world, the No Suprises Act, price and transparency. There's a lot of regulations. I would say, and Mike can certainly comment to this, I would say that when a lot of folks were building their ASCs, there was an opportunity about whether or not they wanted to be in network, stay out of network, what worked best. A lot of people trying to determine the financial situations for their ASC. And I think we're seeing a significant change in the marketplace now that's affecting all of that, particularly as it relates to Medicare Advantage. And I say that because, and Mike can certainly comment here, I would say that we're seeing from our client base, the fastest growing clinical population out there now is Medicare Advantage. Historically speaking, for a long time, really, we stayed in the red, white, and blue model. Medicare sort of creeped along and kept growing. But now we see in a lot of cases with our client bases, we're now, as far as a Medicare population in and of itself, that nearly 2/3 of their population is Medicare Advantage now, where just a few years ago, that would have been the exact opposite, and there'd been more red, white, and blue. Any thoughts around that, Michael?
Yeah, John, this is Mike. I guess kind of to step back into your opening comment, the landscape from an ASC perspective, from our perspective, a managed care perspective, has changed drastically over the last 7 or 8 years. You go back 7, 8, 10 years, and just like you said in your opening comment, that a lot of ASCs where they're fed by their practice ownership, and it kind of breaks down the connectivity of managed care of the referral source. When the referral source is built in, there's really no reason to have to contract in order to achieve the volume. Therefore, it became more of a financial game of what made sense to be in versus out of network. But just like you're alluding to, there's been a whole host of factors that kind of dampened that ability over the past several years. The emergence of high deductible plans, the rollout of the exchange plans that they kind of put that on steroids and kind of moved up high deductible plans into kind of more of the normalcy. You kind of couple that with No Suprises Act that we were commenting on, that between the fact that it imposes a prohibition against balanced billing, coupled with kind of built-in federally ordained mechanisms to put a value-based price on it that lowers the gap between in versus out of network potential reimbursement, that also kind of shut down angles of benefit for being out of network in the first place, which has kind of led the ASC community to have to go back and, on a payer by payer, product line by product line basis, have to redetermine whether or not to get in network. And a lot of times at this point, the answer is yes, that they do need to go back and build a contracted portfolio in order to maintain the ability to see those patients. And then adding on the point that you were just talking about with the Medicare Advantage world, again, you go back 7 years ago, and just like you said, 10% of the Medicare population, 15% of the Medicare population is in a Medicare Advantage plan at that point. Now, with it being over half, maybe as much as 2/3, like you were talking about. And as those plans have rolled from all PPO orientation and full out of network benefits and all those kinds of deployments that again made it where you didn't really have to contract in order to play, now we're at a point where there's more HMO in the market, no out of network benefit HMOs in the market, such that again it's tougher to get your patient from practice to ASC, no matter what the payer source is now in the current world. And so it's changed the world dramatically.
That's a great point, Michael. You touched on something that I think it's too easy to lose sight of, and it's too easy for me to lose sight of as well, is the fact that when you think about a practice that open ASC, and I'm not trying to be redundant, but the fact that you really fill that ASC up with your own patients. And today, now you're going to have to look external about how you get your patients. And I know we'll talk about value-based care in a minute, but I think about all the growth of the vendors that are coming into the marketplaces. You think about our friends in Florida, where we've had aggressive MA growth and aggressive MA value-based growth, and now how they have to work with others to get their referral base. And so that's a change that we're going to see. We'll talk more about, but that's a change we're seeing. And I think that's a significant change. And just as important as understanding that is, if you're going to have to move in that flow of understanding that I'm now going to have to contract more, it's got to be essential to an ASC now to financially understand what that means to them, because there's a reasonable likelihood that you're simply going to reprice your patient population. It may not be a new population. You're simply going to reprice it. And understanding the financial impact of that to your ASC, I think, is essential to that.
Which, as of today, has, and John, jump back in and tell me your experience. As of today, our general reaction in the market has been that because these market forces are kind of pushing pricing down and limiting the referral sources to the point where I have to go back and contract to get in, which also kind of serves to depress the pricing in the first place, the basic practice reaction is, well, I have to cram more volume through there at the lower pricing in order to retain what I had before, which is that's a tough place to be, because that's now I have to, there's only so much volume, as you always talk about, and that I have to, I'm already attempting to do as much as I can in the ASC setting and not in the hospital setting in order to kind of feed the practice's own mechanism. But it's a tough place to be right now. And what has always sort of perplexed me is that from an ASC perspective, the same care is typically being rendered much less expensive than the hospital. And yet, mostly especially the urban hospitals, and yet the ability to get the payers to recognize that and to, understand the savings that's already in pocket and, provide some kind of enhancements to rates to address that it's been tough. It's been very lacking in the market to kind of get the payers to kind of bite on that.
Well, I think there's two things that impact that. You argue with me. I think the first is that when you look at it from a commercial standpoint, that 75% of the commercial population self-insured. So a carrier really is writing checks out of somebody else's checking account. It's not their own money at risk. And then the other thing is whether people agree with this or not, that the reality of it is if you talk to a carrier about how do I sell product, I've got to have the hospital. I can't sell product without the hospital. And so the question is whether you have whether the hospital is accepting of ASCs being in their marketplace, or whether they see them as more predatory, and so they push back against them. So those are facets in a marketplace that just play out.
But I will say that I don't know if this is kind of a glimmer of hope at the end of that rainbow. Um, we now do have the best information we've ever had to at least make the market and or the payers aware of that, because with the hospital pricing transparency, and we represent hospitals as well, and so this is definitely a double-edged sword, and sort of you think about this from market to market. But strictly from the perspective of an independent practice that owns an ASC, that the pricing transparency data, once it moved from just billed charges to payer-based pricing transparency data, became the best data set available to either, on one hand, prove to a payer from a legitimate third party, non-antitrust problem kind of way, to prove to a payer how much savings you're bringing to the table, or on the other hand, to be able to show the market how much you're able to save a particular carrier or employer or what have you. That between those two, being able to leverage that information to either drive volume to an employer or to drive a renegotiation, and pointed that at a payer, is, I feel like we are absolutely just scratching the surface of being able to use that data appropriately to benefit one of those two. Because I'm either going to drive volume by being Walmart or Target, although I hate the analogy of that, or I've got to be able to drive pricing up by being able to show that I'm providing the same quality service as a hospital for a third of the price. That one of those two has to be true if you leverage that data appropriately.
So let me ask you this, Michael. So think about this now. One of the challenges that you have as an ASC, and I'll use the analogy that with a hospital, the real challenge with an ASC today that's physician owned is, if you go back into the payer with that information and you say, all right, I can save you money, I can do these procedures for less cost. The real challenge that they get faced with is, even if a payer wants to address it and wants to adopt that, what keeps them from then, but if I'm going to do that, I'm going to take a bite out of your physician side, out of your physician reimbursement. Historically speaking, and I've always wondered about this, particularly in the rural markets, I never understood why ambulatory service centers don't coalesce and have like an IPA that can separate the contracting with a payer, because otherwise you're always put your physician portion at risk. If you can separate it completely out, then you're only addressing the ASC cost side of it, or the contractual side of it, and you're leaving your physician side alone, so that the payer sees them separately. Would you agree with that?
But I think the issue is more core than that, where I feel like our efforts tend to break down first, are that when we're in front of the payer with a high quality ASC, the comparison point from a pricing perspective that the payer wants to make is this ASC versus other ASCs. The pricing comparison we want them to make is this ASC versus the hospital that these doctors would be taking those cases to if they weren't doing the cases in the ASC. And it's been heretofore fairly difficult to get the payers to cross over that line, even when they're driving massive amounts of savings between those two sets of numbers. Especially now that we have the public data set to kind of prove that out. Whatever that magic sauce is to make the payer understand it from the true savings perspective that's out there. Because the only rationale I can come up with is that the payer must believe that if they move together the pricing of hospital outpatient surgical services and ASC services to closer together, that the ASC setting is just going to drive all kind of extra volume through there, and ramp up that volume so much that the savings are worn away by existing volume that's now paid way higher. I don't understand that, because again, you well know, John, the ASCs that we serve are traditionally LNR, that practice owns that ASC. It's their volume getting from A to B. Therefore, it's not typically a certificate of need ASC that has is taking cases from a whole bunch of outside surgeons in the market. It's usually that one practice. And so the idea that somehow a little bit better pricing is going to drive massive amounts of additional volume through there, it doesn't seem like it bears any sense of reality. And yet getting the payer to think in terms of the savings of the shifted cases versus just the comparison point of other ASCs has been a real challenge for us.
No, I get it, and I know we got to move on. I still like the idea of ASCs considering how to coalesce, only because in today's world, who contracts is not always the same. The same person that contracts for the physician may not be the same person that contracts for ASCs and so forth. And so I think of having that message and being able to take it in a bigger geography, I think has some opportunities there. But I know we have to move on from that.
Well, before we do, I agree with that, and nothing I was saying previously really kind of runs against that. I think just like it has made sense for physicians to come together or hospitals to come together, whether or not it's clinically integrated or not, even if you're just sort of solving logistical issues on the payer side in order to facilitate, some form of better contracting out there. I think all that's absolutely legitimate. I mean, obviously within the context of, legal, antitrust compliant kind of mannerisms of all that.
All right, great. Let's kind of pivot a little bit. We've talked a lot of backgrounds in the ASC market. Now let's take a couple of topics and kind of look forward. Given you guys hit on the points of comparing the hospital outpatient departments, reimbursement mechanisms, differences between those areas and ASCs. Speak to what, if a ASC administrator is listening, physician is listening today, what sort of strategies would you tell them to look forward to given those discrepancies? And if you will, speak to how their ASC fits into the various value-based care models that are out there and those that you see coming down the pipe.
This is John again. I'll sort of start out and then Mike can just sort of add in his thoughts on this. I think realistically, if you look, and I think it varies by state, there are certainly states that are more progressive and have evolved more, has much more specific capitated models in terms of a lot of their MA and value-based models. Value-based really is at its infancy. While payers are trying to create some models, most of it is all based on cost-based models versus actual care or savings, things of that nature. And so the reality of it is their focus is primary care physicians. And so even the venture capitalists that have funded these models, they're really all about how do you get attribution and where does that attribution come from? And that comes from your primary care base. But if I was an ASC, now this is John's perspective, and Mike can comment on this, but if I was an ASC, I would think in today's model, what I would look for is I would look around and see if I've got core primary care practices that are heavily involved in value-based care. And most of that is going to be in the traditional ACO models, red, white, and blue Medicare that first came out, and it's going to be in the Medicare, the fast-growing Medicare Advantage. And then it's going to be in some of the commercial platforms as well. Most noticeably, I would say Blue Cross's PHC program is another place where there's going to be some significant growth. And if I looked in those models, I would say I would work with those providers and say, okay, I may not participate in the financial aspects of it, but here's what I can do. I can be in a better communicative place than you're going to be, maybe with other institutions that are in that marketplace or other ASCs. I can get your patients in on a timely manner. I can communicate with you on a timely manner. I can provide the clinical responses back to you in a timely manner. All the things that they need today to be effective in managing their attribution. But what the real benefit of this, and I go back and I think Michael made such an astute point about this earlier, but the real benefit to me for an ASC is now I'm going to get a definitive referral source. I am no longer depending on my patients to be what feeds my ASC. I've got a definitive referral source. And it's human nature for a physician. If you're taking my Medicare patients, I'm going to send you all of my patients. I don't tend to send them spotty. I tend to find a place that I'm comfortable with and that I have a lot of faith in, and that's where I'm going to send them. And so back to that point of Michael about where you're going to get your patients from, this is an opportunity for you if you have value-based models in your community with your primary care. how you collaborate with them for that base. And I will say this: if they're in your community, and I think this is indicative of the rural communities, don't always look strictly to the independent primary care. You absolutely have to, but don't forget that RHCs and FQs, or particularly FQs, they're FQs that participate in these value-based models. So they're a great resource to collaborate with as well.
Stated differently, what I hear you saying, I think this is absolutely true in the market, that for surgical specialists right now, the value-based play is really a fee-for-service play wrapped in value-based clothing, because in order to grow my referral base and the sort of the attractiveness of my practice, up until now, it's been, my general reputation in the market, probably not based with a whole lot of quality data per se, because it's more relationally based and all that. And then it's the interactivity between my staff from the primary care staff in order to make it easy to get a patient in and the right information goes back over. That at the end of the day, that's been our basic attractiveness to a primary care. Now there's a whole new angle of how I can be attractive to them by understanding their value-based play. And it's not so much about me horning my way in to get part of those dollars, but it's me being such an effective partner in that, understanding the goals that you're supposed to meet, primary care physician, such that if I assist you in that and I help you meet your goals, then I ought to be your natural play on the other side. I don't think anybody would push back on that, because to the degree that becomes either quality-based or cost-based, that's exactly how the program ought to be working, that I need to be held accountable for higher quality and lower overall cost. To the degree I understand that, and that makes me an attractive receiver of primary care volume, that is, that's the brand new version of the physician liaison service that we traditionally have done out there to make sure our primary care practices are happy with us. There's just a whole nother angle for the ones that are sort of diving in the deep end of the pool, the value-based world, that will be for me to have a platform to be attractive to you. And I think, John, like you're saying, I don't think Georgia's on the cutting edge of this. I think we lag behind other states, and I think there's other places to look at in the country that have probably been farther developed with this, for us to look at and go, what does it really look like to be a really effective surgeon that has an ASC, but a really effective surgeon growing my referral base by being effective with helping a primary care group or groups meet their measurements under this. And that whether or not it's tomorrow or a year from now or 2 years from now, 5 years from now, that is going to be, I think, from our perspective, that's going to be one of the lead, if not the lead way that specialists get their volume in the future.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to say this. I know we got to go, but I am going to say this because I think you touched on it again. We are underdeveloped. We talk about being in a fee for service as far as you said, wrapped in a value-based clothing. But the reality of it is when these new models come in, absolutely come and make no mistake about it. There are organizations that are already here, and there are going to be more coming. And the reason that they come here is a virgin market that they just feel like getting in on the front edge is what's going to make them as successful they have been in other states. But in their models, they gravitate out of the fee for service and into the capitated models. And that's where they want to drive everybody. So as they're trying to drive providers into those capitated models, being a referral base that's cost effective and that, going back to your point, pricing transparency will be incredibly important in this, to be able to demonstrate to these plans and these other providers, here's my cost for these set of services. And these are the things that I can do to impact your dollars. And I think you'll see tighter, to your point, I think you'll see tighter relationships between specialists, particularly with ASCs, and primary care, because they're going to be bound by the cost of that plan, because again, they're going to drive it towards capitation. But great point.
All right, great dialogue, fellas, with helpful information for providers to take forward. We hope the audience enjoyed the dialogue format versus our historical Q&A format. We found it very productive, and we certainly look to pick back up next time around as we start diving into primary care and specialist trends, just as we did with ASCs today. So with that, thanks, John. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate y'all's time today.
You've been listening to Beyond the Stethoscope, Vital Conversations with SHP, a production of Strategic Healthcare Partners.
For more information about our podcast, including back episodes, show notes, transcripts, and more, visit our website at shpllc.com/podcasts.
And I know you've heard it before, but please consider rating our podcast in your favorite podcast app. It helps make others aware of the show.
And our podcast wouldn't be possible without our wonderful team of folks.
Editing and production assistance by Nyla, Wiebe, and myself, Aaron Higgins.
And your episode hosts are Aaron Higgins and myself, Jason Crosby.
Our social media coordinator is Jeremy Miller.
Our executive producers are also our principals, Mike Scribner and John Crew.
For more from SHP, consider following us on social media, including Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
And as always, thank you for listening and have a great, wonderful day.
You already know that understanding your data is key to improving patient outcomes and financial performance. But how? At Strategic Healthcare Partners, our analytics services help turn your EMR and other data sources into actionable insights. From identifying areas for improvement to guiding you through implementing changes, SHP supports you every step of the way. Our performance analytics service dives even deeper, providing custom reports that help you stay ahead in the transition to value-based care. Unlock your data's full potential with SHP. Learn more at shpllc.com.